everyone. So today we will be discussing the domain and range of the inverse function. So this will be our first topic for our finals. So since from our previous lesson during our midterm, we are done on the steps on how to get the inverse of a function. Okay, so we're in our first step is that we will to change the f of x to y. Second, we interchange the x and y. Third, we solve for y in terms of x. And the last one is um, we change y into f raised to negative 1 of x. Okay, so now let's move on with the continuation of the topic, which is the domain and range of the inverse function. Since we are done also with the domain and range of the rational function, so this is not um, new to you. Okay, so to determine the domain and range of an inverse function is that if you were to remember during our previous lesson about the inverse, I stated or mentioned that the the original function f of x, wherein let's say its domain is a and its range is b, for the inverse is that we have the f raised to negative 1 of x. The domain will become the range of the original function, which is b, and the range will become the domain of the original function, which is a. That's why um, the domain of the inverse is the range of the original function, and that the range of the inverse is the domain of the original function. Okay? Nag-interchange lang silang dalawa. Okay? So, we have here an example. So you can see we have the original function and the inverse of the original function. So we have here the x, which is our domain, and the y. So by representing the domain and range through table of values, the domain, we have the domains 2, 3, 5, and 10, and we have the range 6, 8, 12, and 21 for the original function. And for the domain and range of the inverse, since we stated a while back that the domain of the original function will become the range of the inverse, therefore, the range of the inverse is we have the 2, 3, 5, and 10, and the domain is the range of the original function, which are 6, 8, 12, and 21. Okay? Uh, just an example using the table of values. Now, we have here the properties of an inverse function. So, if the inverse of the function exists, so pag nag-exist siya, meaning the inverse is a one-to-one function, then the original function f is also a one-to-one. Okay? So, kapag one-to-one yung inverse, therefore, we can um, conclude that the original function is also one-to-one. Di ba? Kapag the inverse of a one-to-one function is one-to-one function, and the inverse of many-to-one function is one-to-many, wherein one-to-many is not a function. Okay? Then, for the domain naman, the domain of the inverse is the range of the original, and the range of the inverse is the domain of the original function. Okay? Parang summary lang nito yung sinabi natin sa previous slides. So now, let's have an example. So, find the domain and range of the inverse function f raised to negative 1 of x is equal to x plus 2 all over 3. Okay, as you can see, class, this one is nasa inverse na siya. Okay? So, given na yung inverse. So, kailangan nating kunin muna yung original function. So, paano yan? So, kung paano yung pagkuha ng inverse ng function, ganun din yung pagkuha ng original. Ibabalik lang natin sa dati. So, we will change the f raised to negative 1 of x to y. So that is y is equal to x plus 2 all over 3. Then we interchange x and y. So y becomes x and x becomes y. Then we cross multiply. 3x is equal to y plus 2. Then we get the value of um, y. So we transpose 2 to the other side. So that will become 3x minus 2 is equal to y. Therefore, the original, I mean, is f of x is equal to 3x minus 2. Okay? So, we have already the inverse and we have already the original. So, hanapin na natin yung ano, yung domain and range niya. So, we get first the ano sabi natin, the domain. So, ang magiging basis lang natin para hindi tayo mahirapan mag-solve is yung properties kanina na ang domain ng inverse is yung range ng original at yung range ng inverse is yung domain ng original. So, kunin muna natin yung domain and range ng original. So, the original function f of x is equal to 3x minus 2. So, since this one is a linear function, at kapag linear function class, wala tayong restriction. Okay? Walang value ng x or y na magpapa-imaginary, magpapa-undefined ng function natin. So, for the domain, so that is the set of all x such that x is an element of real numbers. So, meaning, lahat ng real numbers natin. Okay? I am using the set builder notation. Okay? For the range naman, that is, since range, that is y. So, the set of y such that y is an element of all real numbers. Okay, so yan ang ano natin. Yan ang domain and range ng original natin. Excuse me. For the um for the inverse naman tayo. So yung inverse ay f raised to negative 1 of x. Okay, wait lang. Change natin yung kulay kasi hindi makita. Okay, that is f raised to negative 1 of x is equal to x plus 2 all over 3. So that is the inverse. So therefore, the domain of the inverse is the range of the original. So that is set of x such that x is an element of all real numbers. Kasi, ma'am, bakit x yun? Eh, domain yan. Eh, sabi mo, range. Eh, x nga, domain nga, so x ang gagamitin natin. And for the range naman, we have the set of y such that y is an element of all real numbers. Okay? So, that is the answer for the first problem. Madali lang kapag linear siya kasi wala tayong restriction. Though ito ay rational, pero constant naman yung denominator natin. So, wala tayong restriction dyan. Dito sa may inverse. So, set of all real numbers yung domain and range natin. Okay? Now, let's move on with our next example. So, we have here given ang original function natin, which is f of x is equal to 4x plus 6. So, we will find the inverse and we will find the domain and range of the inverse of the function. So, for the inverse, we have y is equal to 4x plus 6. Then, interchange x and y. So, x is equal to 4y plus 6. And then, so for y in terms of x, so transpose 6 to the other side, then 4y, then divide both sides by 4. So y is equal to x minus 6 all over 4. Therefore, the inverse is f of raised to negative 1 of x is equal to x minus 6 all over 4. Okay? So, for the domain, we will now solve for the, we will now determine the domain. So, kunin muna natin yung original. That is f of x is equal to 4x plus 6. So, for the domain, that is, since linear, again, all real numbers, so set of x such that x is an element of all real numbers. And for the range, same lang, that is set of y such that y is an element of all real numbers. And for the negative, negative to, for the inverse, so that is f of raised to negative 1 of x is equal to x minus 6 all over 4. So that will become the domain is set of the range. So yung range natin, yan. Therefore, set of x such that x is an element of all real numbers also. And for the range, which is the domain of the original, that is set of y such that y is an element of all real numbers. Okay, so that is for the second problem. Next, for the third problem, so we have the function f of x is equal to x minus 2 square root of x minus 2. So we will find its inverse. So again, that is y is equal to square root of x minus 2. Then interchange natin. So x is equal to square root of y minus 2. Then we solve for the value of y in terms of x. So since may square root tayo dito, we extract the square root. Yan. Then cancel, cancel. So that will become x squared is equal to y minus 2. Then para ma-solve natin yung y, we transpose negative 2 to the other side. That will become x squared plus 2 is equal to y. Therefore, the inverse is we have the f of is to negative 1, which is x squared plus 2. Okay? So, for the domain, so we found the inverse of the function. So, for the domain and range na, so the original is f of x is equal to square root of x minus 2. Oh. So, for the domain, since meron tayong radical dyan, so ito, kapag ganito, hindi tayo pwedeng magkaroon ng negative. Kasi magkakaroon tayo ng imaginary. So, kailangan nating iwasan yung negative na yan. So, kung yung square root of x minus 2 na yan, so, ano yung magpapanegative dito? Ano yung value ng x na magpapanegative? So, that will become negative 3. Tama ba ako? Negative 3. So, kapag negative 3 minus 2, I know, hindi pala siya negative 3. That will, para maging negative yan, negative 3 minus 2, that will become negative 5. Okay, yeah. So, negative 3. Kasi ang negative 2 minus 2, that will become negative 4 also. So, hindi pwede ang negative 2. So, negative 1 also. 0, hindi rin pwede. 1, hindi rin pwede. So, 1, kasi 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So, yun sa square root of x minus 2 natin, mag-start lang tayo kay 2. Kasi kapag 2 yan, that is square root of 2 minus 2, that will become 0, square root of 0, which is 0. So, hindi pwedeng maging negative. So, hindi pwedeng maging negative 1. hindi pwedeng maging negative 1, hindi pwedeng maging 1, o mag-start tayo kay 1, hindi pwede ang 1, hindi pwede ang 0, hindi pwede ang negative 1, negative 2, until negative infinity. So, hindi na pwede yung mga yan. So, ang magiging domain na natin dyan is that the set of x such that x is greater than or equal to 2. Okay? Kasi 2, kapag 2, 2 minus 2 is 0. So, ang domain natin ay x, set of x such that x is greater than or equal to 2. Kasi 2 minus 2 is 0. So, above 2, 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. So, pwede na yon. So, hindi na pwede. So, hindi pwede ang maging value ng x natin ay mas bababa kay 2. Okay? So, yan yung domain natin. So, for the range naman, so kung ang tawag dito, 2 ay, mag-start kay 2 dito, so ano ang, kapag 2 ang x natin, ano yung lumabas? 0. So therefore, ang range natin ay set of y such that y is greater than or equal to 0 naman. Kasi yung range is yung output. Okay? So, ang input natin is yung domain. So, kapag 2 ang ginamit, ang lalabas ay 0. So, mag-start kay 0. Kapag 3 naman ang ginamit natin, 3 minus 2 is 1. So, ang lalabas ay square root of 1, which is 1. So, ang magiging range natin ay 0 up to the positive infinity. Okay? So, yun yung magiging range natin. For the inverse naman, which is f of raised to negative 1 of x is equal to x squared plus 2. So, for the domain, ang domain naman niya ay yung range natin. Ito, yung range natin ng original. So, since domain, we're talking about domain, so we use the x. So, set of x such that x is greater than or equal to 0 naman. And for the range, that is set of y such that y is greater than or equal to 2. Okay? So, ganyan yung mga condition. Hindi tayo pwedeng magkaroon ng negative number kasi magkakaroon tayo ng imaginary answer. Okay? So, next problem. So, example is the function again, f of x is equal to x squared minus 8. So, we get that this is the original function. So, we get the inverse muna. That is y is equal to x squared minus 8. Interchange. So, x is equal to y squared minus 8. Then, solve for y in terms of x. So, transpose natin yung negative 8 to the other side. That will become positive 8. Y squared. Then, para y lang, we remove this 1. Square dyan. So, we put radical here. So, cancel, cancel. So, y is equal to square root of x plus 8. That is the inverse. So, the inverse is f of raised to negative 1 is equal to square root of x plus 8. So, yan yung inverse natin. Now, for the domain and range, yan, move na tayo sa domain and range. Original muna tayo. So, f of x is equal to x squared minus 8. So, for the domain, okay, so since ito yung x natin, naka-square siya, so wala tayong restriction dyan. Okay, so meaning, ang domain natin ay lahat ng real number. Hindi tayo magkakaroon ng restriction dyan. Kasi wala naman tayong radical sign dyan. So, for the range naman, so, kung ang tawag dito, kung ang x natin ay ang domain natin ay all real numbers, so let's say, so, kung ang x natin ay 1 or negative 1, so kapag 1 squared is equal to 1 minus 8, that will give us negative 7. Kapag negative 1, magbibigay lang din siya ng negative 7. Kapag 0 naman yan, kapag 0 naman ito, yung x natin, magbibigay siya ng negative 8. Okay? So, kapag negative 0, negative 2 and positive 2, parehas lang yung lalabas na range. Okay? Diba? Kung x is 2 and x is negative 2, sana. So that is x squared is minus 8. So kung 2, 2 squared is 4, 4 minus 8 is negative 4. And negative 2 squared is 4, 4 minus 8 is negative 4. So same lang yung lumalabas. So, ang ending, ang magiging pan lang natin sa range is that, ang nag-iiba lang ay yung, no. So, ang range natin is that, so, kapag negative or positive ang magiging value ng x natin, same lang yung lalabas. So, start tayo kay 0. So, that is set of y such that y is an, not element of real numbers. So, greater than or equal to negative 8 tayo. Okay? Kasi kung 0, negative 8. Kung 1 naman, negative 7. Kung, kung 2 naman, negative 4. So, papataas siya. Negative 8, ang range natin ay mas mataas or equal kay negative 8. So, for the domain and range of the inverse naman, the square root of x plus 8. So, ang domain natin ay the range. So, that is set of x such that x is greater than or equal to negative 8. Kasi ang negative 8 plus 8 is 0. Okay? Diba? Square root of negative 8 plus 8 is equal to square root of 0, which is 0. Pero kapag maging negative 9 yan, so hindi na siya pwede. Okay? So, kaya yun yung property ng inverse function natin, yung domain and range niya. So, ang range naman niya ay set of y such that y is an element of all real numbers. Okay? So, yan. Yung pagkuha ng domain and range ng problem natin. Next, okay? So, we have here a rational function. So, we get the domain and range of the function. Pero, kulang, pati yung inverse dapat dito. Kasi inverse yung kailangan natin kunin yung domain and range. So, that is y is equal to 1 over x plus 2. Then, we interchange x and y. So, 1 over y plus 2. Then, we cross multiply. That is xy plus 2x is equal to 1. So, we solve for y in terms of x. So, ito, ilipat natin sa kabila. That is xy is equal to 1 minus 2x. Then, we solve for y. That is, divide both sides by x. So, y is equal to 1 minus 2x over x. Okay, for the inverse, that is f of raised to negative 1 of x is equal to 1 over 2x all over x. Okay. So, for the domain and range, for the original, that is f of x is equal to 1 all over x plus 2. So, for the domain, so, remember that our denominator should not be equal to 0 dito. So, what would be the value of x here that will make, okay, hahanapin naman natin yung yung value ng x na magpapa-0 sa natin, sa denominator. So, ang tinuro ko, that is x plus 2 is equal to 0. So, x is equal to negative 2. So, negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So, meaning, yun yung restriction natin. Hindi included ang negative 2 sa domain natin. So, kapag ganyan, since isa lang naman ang hindi kasali, so, set of x such that x is an element of all real numbers except negative 2. Okay? Hindi included ang negative 2. Okay? Or we can write the word except. Okay? So, that is for the domain. So, for the range naman, so, we solve for, may tinuro na ako ito na process. So, ulitin ko lang. So, paano pagkuha ng range ng rational? So, we change f of x to y. This is 1 over x plus 2. Then, we cross multiply. 2y is equal to 1. Then, tawag mo dito, we solve for, we transpose 2y to the other side. So, 1 minus 2y, then divide both sides by y. So for x natin. So, x is equal to 1 minus 2y over y. So, ito naman yung denominator natin. So, dito naman, since y lang yan, so what would be the value of y that will make uh, the, this one undefined? So, hindi pwedeng maging 0 yan. So, meaning, ang range niya ay set of all y such that y is an element of all real numbers except 0. Okay? So, hindi pwedeng kasali ang 0. Kasi 0, kapag y ang 0 natin, it will make the function undefined. Okay? So, yan yung domain image natin ng original. So, for the inverse naman, since na-solve naman na natin, so that is 1 minus 2x over x. So, therefore, the domain is that set of x such that x is an element of all real numbers except 0. Okay? Kasi yun yung range natin. And for the range naman, set of all y such that y is an element of all real numbers except negative 2. Okay? So, yan. Yan yung domain and range and the inverse of the function f of x is equal to 1 all over x plus 2. Next problem. I think this is the last problem. So again, we have the original. So we find the inverse. So that is y is equal to negative 2 all over 1 minus x. So interchange natin yung x and y. Then we solve for y in terms of x. So that is cross multiplication. So 1 times x is x. Then negative y times x is negative xy is equal to negative 2. Okay, then we transpose the x to the other side. So negative xy is equal to negative 2. No. Not plus. Minus x. Okay? Then for that, solve natin yung y. So we divide both sides by negative x para y lang ang maiwan. So we cancel. So y is equal to, so since negative yung 2 natin, negative yung x, negative divided by negative, positive, so that is 2, then negative x divided by negative x is positive, so plus x all over x. So that is the inverse, that is f of, so negative 1 of x is equal to 2 plus x all over x. Okay? So that's the inverse. Now, for the domain, we get for the original, that is f of x is equal to negative 2 all over 1 minus x. Okay, so for the domain, what would be our restriction? It should be 1. 1. Kasi 1 minus 1 is 0. So, set of x such that x is an element of all real numbers except 1. Okay, hindi kasali ang 1 natin. Kasi 1 minus 1, that will become 0. And it will give us an undefined answer. And for the range, okay, so for the range, change f of x to y. So, negative 2 all over 1 minus x. Then, cross multiply. So, 1 times y is y. Then, minus xy is equal to negative 2. Then, lipat yung y sa kabila. So, negative xy is equal to negative 2 minus y. Then, divide both sides by negative y para maiwan yung positive x. So, cancel yung negative and y. So, x is equal to negative 2 divided by negative y is positive. Then, negative divided by negative is positive all over y. So, y again yung denominator natin. So, for the range, set of y such that y is an element of all real numbers except 0. So, hindi pwede ang 0. Okay? So, for the inverse naman, so f of raised to negative 1 of x is equal to 2 plus x all over x. So, for the domain, that is set of x such that x is an element of all real numbers except 0. And for the range naman, yung domain natin yung original, that is set of y such that y is an element of all real numbers except 1. Okay? So, yan. Ganyan yung pagkuha ng domain and range natin ng inverse of a function. Okay? So, I hope you understood the lesson. So, for your activity, for your first activity for these finals, find the inverse of the function and its domain and range. So, dalawa lang naman yan. So, please write this on your notebook to be checked on Monday or yung schedule natin. Okay? So, thank you for listening. Bye!